Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again. It's a Thursday at 10 after 11. A little bit of a warmer day today. Hope everyone's doing good. My first, I guess, first official full day of vacation. For me, it's more of a staycation. Not really planning on going anywhere yet. It would be nice maybe next week. I might go for a little road trip. I'm gonna go down to Portland with some friends for New Year's, so it'll be fun. And just doing last minute Christmas shopping, wrapping, wrapping and such. Getting a couple of ideas for a couple other things. But I really want to, thank everyone for checking out the channel. It's been really great. Every day there's been more and more people subscribing to the channel, so it's been growing. When I first started doing this channel, it was, it's slow going. I always heard, YouTube is very, very new for me. I just started hitting up YouTube probably in like late summer, where I started doing a lot of videos. And then I started doing videos. At one point, I was doing them every couple of weeks on YouTube, and then I started doing them a little bit more, a couple times during the week. And now it's I do it every day. I try to do it every morning or every day. It's a lot of fun. The way the setup is, it's a lot easier. And I notice, just the more content that I have seems to get more, obviously gets more traction and attention to a degree. And I really appreciate people checking out. And there's been more and more people commenting on the videos, which has been really awesome. That's one my favorite thing is to interact with people who have similar tastes or the same tastes that I have. That's the to me that's the best part. That's one of the reasons I love doing the interview shows so much. I just did a show yesterday where I did a documentary about Gigi Allen. So it's a rough movie to get through, but it's worth it. So I'm always trying to mix things up, trying to always bring a little bit of variety, but the focus is always going to be on my favorite genre of filmmaking. Sometimes I feel funny saying that just because I love so many different things. Same thing with music. I love try to always had one thing I've always feel like one attribute that I think that I've always had for some reason even as a kid was being open-minded to different things. I've always been curious about the world that we live in and different ways that one can live their life. So I've always had a curious mind. I've never been, at least I never think I've never been super, narrow in my thinking. I've always tried to expand different views, or try to expand into understanding different views. And that also was, it probably, as a kid, it started off for me with music, where I had I grew up like most American kids. I grew up listening to rock music, and then it eventually led to heavier music, more extreme music, and then I started to branch out. I always had different interests. I loved bands like Morbid Angel when I was a kid, and I still love them. And then, but then I also loved groups like Depeche Mode. So I always and in groups like the Pixies. So I've always tried to have a expanded mind on checking out new things, not always being so rigid into only thinking of a particular thing. And then if it's something I don't understand, don't really be too judgmental. Maybe make an assertion on my own by checking out that respected genre that is kind of outside of my perimeters at that time. And then maybe at that point, after I've checked out some of those things, then I can make make an assumption as opposed to seeing something on the outskirts and to a degree realizing that it's very different. So automatically, it doesn't really have any merit or credibility. I try to spend what I try to do is when that happens, especially when I was a kid, I would try to, instead of making that assertion, I would take the time to check out the groups or bands in that particular genre that was at the time very foreign to me. And then from there, I'll, then at that point, then I'll make an assertion of like, is it something I dig or something that motivates me or that inspires me? I do the same thing with film. I was looking. It was funny. I was looking through my videos yesterday, and I thought it was pretty funny, but cool in its own way. And I'm not at all tooting my own horn, but I thought it was pretty cool and funny that have have a big variety. I think on this channel, with the primary focus being on the genre that I love the most. But I love all kinds of things, so I thought it was funny when I realized, wow, I have like a review for the new Avatar movie, the new James Cameron movie, and then also Blood Feast by Herschel Gordon Lewis. They're both films. They're both, uh, you know, that's the only way they're kind of related. They're as polar opposite as probably one could you know can imagine. So I pride myself that I try to bring a little bit of variety. My favorite genre, like I've said, many times, but my favorite genre is the horror exploitation world. That's just kind of my jam. To me, it's like, with music, same thing. I love all styles of music. There's so many different styles, and I'm always trying to check out new things. But I always naturally gravitate towards electronic music. I always go back to that. That's always my source. That's my deepest love. A band that I listen to constantly in my car, and I never ever get sick of them. And it doesn't really depend. Like I don't have to be in a certain mood, but a band that I constantly play, Autechre, which is my favorite band. I listen to them pretty much daily. I bought a box set of all of their music a few months ago, and it had like 8 discs in it, and it was like $50, but it's amazing. And there's so much music on it, so I've been listening to that, constantly and checking out different albums and sitting with some of the stuff. But again, I listen to a lot of different styles, but that's always my go-to. I'm always like, that's always going to be on at some form of capacity. It's the same thing for me for movies. I love a lot of the big, Hollywood films. Like I said, I did a show on Avatar, The Way of Water, Aliens, and whatnot. But my jam, my go-to style that I just love is the exploitation horror world. It's kind of the same thing. It's you think everybody has their you know with in regards to like tastes and those kinds of things. I think everybody has their they might have a real broad palette of different things that they love, but there might always be say a particular genre that they always go to regardless of what's going on, and that is kind of their jam. So that's kind of how it is for me. So this is a show today on a movie that I have such a deep love for, and I think in a lot of ways it was way ahead of its time because of where as far as horror icons, new films that are popular now. Case in point, in the last couple of years, a few years, Stephen King's remake of It, starring the famous clown Pennywise, and probably the biggest thing or most talked about new horror film is the the Terrifier movies, which stars Art the Clown. There's always been, I think more now than ever, a fascination in like the horror culture with clowns. They're, people equate those to being, the figure of a clown as being just completely terrifying. Even though I feel obviously culturally, when that character or characters or the idea of what clowns were was, when we were introduced to it as a kid or as kids, it was supposed to be, a joyous, fun, exuberant kind of character, not really synonymous with terror and nightmares. I attribute that whole kind of switch to the original Stephen King adaptation of it. That really took the idea of what clowns are and made them into like this terrifying creature. And it wasn't really a thing of childlike innocence anymore. It wasn't really a thing of of fun or light entertainment. It became a figure of like a terrifying icon. So, and I also feel this movie that I'm going to talk about today was, to a degree, which came before it. I kind of feel like this movie legitimately started the allure of clowns as as being terrifying creatures, and that is the one and only Killer Clowns from Outer Space. One of the greatest B horror exploitation movies ever. When I was a kid, my I grew up in New York, and my uncle and my aunt lived right across the street, pretty much right across the street from me. And I used to go over their house, for we do family get-togethers or whatnot. And my aunt had this incredible fascination with clowns as a kid. And I remember going over there as a kid, and I believe her house is still probably the same kind of thing. But she had, like, my aunt Kathy had a fascination with clowns. So when you would walk in her house, every every wall, every room that you walked through or went into had all of these clown paintings. And I remember as a kid always seeing that. And I remember as a kid when I first saw, you know, those images, I always equated it to me. It always, brought back. It made me think of something fun and whimsical and comedic and something for children, and it was kind of wholesome. And over a period of time, I started to, those images started to kind of mean a very different thing for me, and I felt that they were actually pretty terrifying. And this was like 1,000 years ago. And I feel like this movie, and at that time, this movie had come out in the '80s, and this was a movie I feel that really changed that. I remember seeing this as a kid, and suddenly these characters, these clowns were suddenly went from this lighthearted, fun, joyous personality to being outwardly terrifying. And then I remember seeing it on cable when the TV movie, the original adaptation with Stephen King, came out. And so the whole thing changed. And now where we're at, especially the last few years, now that's like a regular thing. There is actually a diagnosed phobia that people have for clowns. And now that's a regular face of horror, especially now with the talk and all of the hype around the Terrifier movies, which I've done some shows in the past where I've talked about them. Not a huge fan of those movies. I've only seen the first one, Not really excited about seeing the second one. I kind of feel like they're overhyped. But the actual image I love, and I really love the iconic, that iconic image of the clown as being kind of this monstrous creature that's out of your nightmares. And of course, when I talk about the original It, uh, with the iconic Pennywise, played by Tim Curry, who is such an awesome, amazing actor. He was the darkness in that great fantasy movie Legend starring Tom Cruise. Such an iconic role. So many great roles. He's uh he's very well known. He's probably most well known as an actor as when for his role as Pennywise, and also Rocky Horror Picture Show. He played a Frankenfooter, which was like a transvestite, version of Frankenstein. I've always loved that movie. I've always, when I was in high school, and we, it was a tradition that we would go to the theater, and everybody would bring the toilet paper, the shaving cream, and throw stuff in the theater, and everybody would dress up as characters. Like that was always a thing. You'd go to the midnight show. Iconic movie. I saw that recently in the store on DVD, or actually Blu-ray, and I didn't buy it for some reason, and now I really regret it. I saw it at Goodwill. I don't know why I didn't buy it. I think, actually no, I think I remember I brought it. It was at the Goodwill in Belfast. It was pretty recently, and I brought it. I picked it up. I was really excited to buy it because it's a classic movie, and I brought it to pay for it. And I remember the lady had looked at the CD, and I looked at it too, and I think I remember why I didn't buy it, because it was kind of scratched up. So I think that's why I didn't buy it. I didn't buy it because I was like, no, I'm not going to spend the money on it, and it was, like maybe $7, which is a little bit more money than you would want to probably spend for a used DVD or Blu-ray. But anyway, and the iconic remake starring Stephen King, I mean, the adaptation by Stephen King, and with Peter Sarsgaard playing it. The first movie, I think, they divided that movie into two chapters. The first movie is, I think, just amazing. Just an amazing horror film. I think one of the best, in general, one of the better horror films that's come out in the last 10 years. He did an amazing job as Pennywise. The sequel was really bad, I thought. Really a letdown. I saw that in the theater, and it was just kind of a mess. But my favorite clown movie is easily Killer Clowns from Outer Space. I got this. I have a pretty long history with this film. I saw it, when I was a kid. I saw it all the time. It was a regular staple as a kid in my diet of watching VHS movies. This was a go-to movie. And then about probably 3 or 4 years ago, I was at Goodwill in Rockland, and they had Killer Clowns on DVD, and I still have that. And I watched it when I got it. I hadn't seen it in years, and I've watched it many many times since then. And then it was probably about a year ago, I was at Bull Moose, and they had a special edition on Blu-ray, so I was super excited. Yeah, I was totally pumped. And since then, I've seen this movie so many freaking times. I love this movie because it's funny. I love this movie because of the restraint around it. It's a sci-fi horror movie, and there isn't like, it could have gone in the direction of where it's like super uber gory or just really graphic, but it has this, like, the film has this childlike innocence, and it's super campy. It's super funny, and a lot of the things are kind of implied as far as what happens. But at the same time, it's such a creepy movie. I think it's one of the creepiest movies, even though it's a comedy too. It's like a black comedy, and it's a total, like, low, super low budget kind of exploitation movie, and it's hilarious. It's like, it's so funny, and the clown designs are just so amazing. Like, they're actual. There's actually guys in costumes. There's no CGI. But there's some moments in the film. Every time whenever I see it, I just think there's some of the creepiest moments ever in a film. And really, nothing is happening. It's basically like where the clown. There's a shot of the clown looking at maybe some kids, or there's a shot of the clowns, and just their images is so creepy and haunting. This movie came out in 1988, which is hard to believe. I mean, just such a great movie. It's rated PG-13, which I think, given that, even though there is some gore in the film, and there are some scenes in it and kills in the film more or less that are pretty messed up. This film was directed by Steven Chioda, and this whole movie was literally a family affair. The screenplay was by Steven Chioda, Charles Chioda, and Edward Chioda. These guys were, independent filmmakers. They're all brothers, and it's so funny when you watch this film and you watch the credits. Every, pretty much every name in the credits is with the last name Chioda. They were, this inseparable group of brothers that made these B movies, and they went on to direct quite a few other movies. Basically, they're all like sequels to this movie. And this is like right up. I feel like this movie is also like right up there. I mean, at that time it was a modern day version of it, but it's right up there with like the classic Ed Wood films. Plan 9 from Outer Space, or like the original Blob. Total B movie craziness. Super, super, uber low budget. But the thing I always talk about with why I love these movies so much is that they just have such atmosphere. And this movie just has that. I mean, it's like their spaceship is a big pop up tent, circus tent. And they have these like razor sharp teeth. It's just, yeah, it's just so hilarious. The music is just so amazing. It's got one of the best soundtracks I think ever. And the special features on this disc is pretty incredible. They have interviews with all the Chioda brothers, and those guys are like walking encyclopedias when it comes to movies, particularly horror and science fiction movies. In the interviews they talk about all of their influences. One of their biggest influences that they talk about, which is a movie I want to eventually do a show on, is Forbidden Planet, starring Leslie Nielsen, which I think is one of the greatest sci-fi B movie B exploitation movies ever. I think that movie was such a pivotal movie for that genre, and went on to influence countless movies. And the Chioda brothers talk about how much that movie had an influence on them. And there's actually scenes where they kind of ripped off to a degree from that movie, which I think is so cool. And they put it in this different context, so it's totally a different thing, and it's their own style, but just amazing. Again, like I said, it's got some of the greatest music ever. One of the best soundtracks, probably in horror history. The legendary soundtrack was composed by John Massari, and there's another really great. Both copies that I have of this film, I have it on VHS, and I have it on DVD, and then I have the newest edition on Blu-ray, and they both have a great special features package that's included with the movie, and they have a really great interview, like I said, with the Chioda brothers. But there's a really great interview with John Massari, the guy who did all the music for the film. And he really, like, it's basically him sitting around in the recording studio, and and it was done. I think the documentary or the interview was done, in like, about 10 years ago or so. And it's just basically him with the guy who's interviewing him, and he's sitting in the studio, and he's like talking about all the equipment and how he went about to record the movie. and how he got the gig, and it's super funny, and he's using and it's super heavy synth based music, very electronica, has like a little bit of a new wave kind of punk vibe to it. The story of how John Massari said he got the gig was he saw like that there was an ad placed, and I believe it was in I think it was in New York, L.A. There was a big ad put in the paper that the filmmakers, the Chioda brothers, were looking to find somebody who could score the film. So what they did was they had a big showing of the film Killer Clowns from Outer Space at this like local theater at the time, and but it was going to be for just for basically people who are interested in maybe doing the music for it. So they basically showed the movie for all of these possible composers that were trying to get the job. And at the end of it, and I guess they used like kind of temporary music for the actual cut of the film, and it was an uncut version. It was a longer film. It wasn't really assembled, but they felt like well they could get the people who were coming to audition could get a sense of what was going on. And then after that, they concluded showing the film. John Massuri said like automatically he's like I can this is my this is my bread and butter. I love it. This is going to be my jam. This is going to be my thing. And they had a meet and greet where he met with the brothers. They met with all of the people that showed up, and then I think within they were given all of the guys and girls that showed up to possibly to get the gig for being the composer for the film for the music. They basically gave them a couple of days to kind of come up with some stuff, and then later on they would meet with them and check them out. And he got the gig instantly. And at first he said that people were when he got the gig and people were initially he was telling people about what he was going to be doing. They looked at him like it was a joke, and that this would kind of end his career, and that this was like this movie was a piece of crap, and why would you do this kind of a thing. Maybe you should do something that's like a legitimate movie with like a bigger budget, and so he got this like backlash from a lot of friends and people that he knew about doing the music. But then that film, when it came out, it was a sensation, and it was a huge hit. And now it was like looked at as like this cult classic, and that really started his career. And so it went to such a different direction for him, and just his whole like career exploded after that. So it was funny the switch, all of a sudden where there's all this backlash, and then when it actually comes out, it just there's a fire lit. And after John Massuri's career exploded, after when Killer Clowns came out and was a huge success, he had a huge career, and it's amazing where his career went. Like, it's wild. When you look up some of the things he's done, he actually went on to do, which I think is hilarious, and was like, actually, it was before Killer Clowns of Outer Space. Little House on the Prairie. He did the music for that, which is mind blowing, from 1982, 1983. He went on to he did the music for Heart to Heart, which was like a famous TV show also, and that came out in 1982. So, and he also did the Ray Bradbury theater theme for the science fiction show. Johnny Quest he did, The Wonderful World of Disney, The Wizard of Speed and Time, and then Killer Clowns from Outer Space after that. So basically, like his friends and his circle of people thought that this movie would destroy his career, but it didn't. It just he got even bigger. He went on to do Kickboxer 5. I mean, the list of films that he's done is just insane. Uh, Ring Around the Rosie, Stem Cell, the Cell 2 he did, which was the sequel to the original. So yeah, you just never know. And I would say for his career, like this was the most popular, film of his long career, and he's still really active. But I can't. If you've never seen this movie, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, then I think you live in a cave, and you got to see this. It's one of the most entertaining movies, and it's a perfect mix. I look at it as mostly a comedy, but it's the perfect mix of a black comedy, sci-fi horror movie. It's just great, and it's super weird. It's got this really weird kind of quality to it, and it's a great balance because I feel like there's some things about the film that are really kind of super creepy in a lot of ways, but it's also super funny, and there's a cool like balance where it goes, it's like in the middle the whole time, particularly around the images of the clown and the way it's shot. Just an incredible atmosphere. I love this movie to death. It's one of my favorite cult horror exploitation movies of all time. The Chioda brothers went on to direct three or four sequels, and then they've basically made a career turning these films into, turning this film into a giant franchise. I've only seen maybe part two and part three maybe once or twice, and eventually I'd like to see them again. I don't remember them being, super standout kind of films, but they created this, legendary franchise off of this one movie, and it's amazing. And fairly recently too, there was within the last 7 years, there was a Killer Clowns from Outer Space video game that launched. So, it's amazing, and all the royalties and it's amazing to see what this little tiny kind of weird black comedy movie went on to really find an audience like commercially, and it's like a huge success. Went on to become a huge success, and basically these guys, the brothers, the Chioda brothers, were basically able to just make an entire career just off of one movie, and that's what they continue to do to this day. So just awesome. I can't say enough about it. Really great artwork too for this. And the special features. I got this super cheap. I think I got it for like $5, $4 at Goodwill. And this is a really good edition. This is like a special edition of this movie. Transfer of the color, of the picture, transfer of the color, and and the remastering of the soundtrack is super awesome. Definitely one of my go-to movies when I'm in the mood for something a little bit funny and weird and creepy, and just great, just great. I love the science fiction element to this film too. It really has that fantasy, uh, science fiction fantasy kind of thing going on. So it's just super entertaining. But this is Jason Dean, so please check this movie out if you've never seen it. It is it is one of the greatest classics ever. Definitely, I've talked about sometimes, where people have these lists of certain movies that they love, your top 20, top 50, or your top 10, top 5. I always kind of have that in my head, but I've never done a show or like say have done a thing of where I've like, presented my definite, lists of movies. The one movie I always say is my favorite movie of all time, without even thinking about it, and it still is Godfather, the original. But other than that, my list is, I have an idea of what those movies are, in various genres. But Killer Clowns is definitely up there. But it's the rest, other than The Godfather, my list is pretty loose and informal, and it does change a little bit to a degree. But Killer Clowns is right up there. It's an amazing movie. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again. If you like this channel, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Peace.